Hello and welcome to the Quantum Bridge. We're fortunate enough to have yet another guest with us, a new guest, and I'm very pleased about that, as I always am with new guests. But since Gary was the person who found our new guest, I'm going to pass across to him to do the rest of the intro. And by the way, hi Gary, hope you're well.
I am, thank you very much, Len. And welcome Dr. Teck Khong to the show. How are you this evening?
Fine, thank you very much. Thank you, Casper and Gary, for the invitation. Thank you for the welcome.
Yeah, very
Pleasure.
much. So, yeah, I've been following you online for a while, when it was formerly Twitter, and back to, I suppose you came onto my spotlight during the Brexit Party sort of era.
Yeah.
But before we get on to that, I mean, I'll just read a little bit from your ex-profile, that you're a former police surgeon, NHS doctor, and now the leader of the ADF, which is the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom. Is that all correct?
It is indeed.
There we go. Fantastic. Off to a good start. So maybe, yeah, for our audience, could you give us a little bit, maybe, you know, how you, well, just before we came on, you mentioned that you wasn't originally from the UK, how you came here, and in your medical career, we'll go through that, and then hopefully move into where you are now.
Yes, in a very brief nutshell, I was born in a distant corner of the British Empire. It was the British colony of Malaya, and I went to an English school, then came across here for my medical education at Sheffield University, after which I did various house jobs in Sheffield. I did a registrar job in Leeds, went on to rheumatology research as a registrar, and because the promotional prospects were very sluggish in those days, I went to general practice, and I found one in Leicester, which met my basic criteria of being somewhere along the spine of England near the motorway, for easy exit and entrance, as it were. And I was a GP from 1982 to year 2000. I stayed on for a couple more years just to help the new guys settle in, and did some work in the casualty at the accident emergency department of Nottingham's Queen Medical Centre. And here I am, retired. Basically, I'm a very late entrant to politics. It was about midpoint in my career serving the community that I realized that health policy wasn't what it was cracked up to be. And because I was working in one of the 10 poorest wards in the country, I realized the population that I was looking after had very severe unmet needs. So to cut a long story short, one of my patients was a politician. She introduced me to the Conservative Party. It didn't really matter which party it was. I was determined to improve the lives of what I would call the lowest common denominator, because I felt, you know, these working people who built the wealth of the country should be at least as well looked after as anybody else in the country. So I was introduced to politics, and here I am today. Firstly, I stood as a Conservative Party candidate. The ethos sounded all right at the time because I really admired Margaret Thatcher. But because the needs of the people were at variance with the direction of the party, eventually I found myself, having been made a candidate and fought an election for them, I was out of kilter, and I was deleted from the list. So it was supposed to be curtains, but because of my insight into health policies, social care, one of the smaller parties, well, at the time it was UKIP, in fact, they appreciated what I was trying to do, invited me across. I stood for them at one election, but because the party was, again, not heading very far, very fast, I left. And one of the members invited me to help them with a health portfolio, and I did. Now, the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom was founded in August 2020, right bang in the middle of the pandemic year. So we didn't do any canvassing, we didn't grow the party very fast, but they were very very sincere, worthy people who founded the party, some of them very seasoned veteran politicians. So we chose the name Alliance for Democracy and Freedom, cognizant of the fact that there are a lot of independent people coming up, who couldn't find themselves aligned to any party ethos. We also thought that after the 2019 general election, there wasn't any political party any of us could vote for. So that was the idea for choosing the word alliance. We know that democracy is, in fact, a very far cry from what people expect. And there was increasing curtailment of personal freedom, and national sovereignty wasn't quite achieved despite Brexit. Brexit was obviously half-baked. So here we are. We are with, or I am with the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom. That's how we got our name. Excuse me, just a bit of a cold. The way we run the party is very much directed at localizing democracy. We don't have party branches. We leave people in regional areas under the guidance of a coordinator. And we try and encourage people to have the title proud of. So if you came from Sheffield, you'd be proud of Sheffield, you form a little group. If you're selected as a candidate by the proud of Sheffield, you will be answerable to them, not to the party, the central party machinery. We're only here in existence to look after the national affairs such as defence. Well, health is very much involved, of course, the economy and so on. So we have proud of whatever region you are. We have a very active proud of Fylde, proud of Jarrow, proud of Isle of Wight. And then we also have proud of vocational groups like proud of British fishermen, proud of British farmers. And we try and get these groups to talk and interdigitate their needs and their policy ambitions. So we have, for example, feeding into the committee, proud of British farmers, saying really we need to look at how the farmlands are being decimated and so on. So that is the brief run through is what Alliance for Democracy and Freedom is about, and how I got there after a few years in the wilderness.
Yeah, I mean it has been a political wilderness generally, I would say.
Yes.
The public haven't had much way to voice their opinions in that sense. If we look back to, like we say, you could say we had a swell around that 2016 period where we had, I mean, like I say, like I mentioned to you previously before we came on, that we have a US audience as well. And you had that sort of Brexit Trump thing in 2016. Of the people sort of start saying, you know, we don't like this current status quo, big government, big corporations. And then I guess maybe there was a pushback from the powers that be, as you say, even, well, a lot of people I felt were getting behind the Brexit party. I mean, I was myself, I was like, well, okay, here we have a vehicle. And then we had a moment there, I'm guessing he was asked to stand down in some way.
So was I.
Yeah, that's right. So it's, I mean, whether somebody had a word in Nigel's ear that something big was coming in 2020 and to, you know, don't get involved. That's my conspiracy head. But, you know, how do you see it now that we've still got these little small parties trying to get, you know, some representation for the people? So.
Well, that is why we also chose the name Alliance, the word Alliance in the name, purely and simply because we were aware of the fact that if we needed to change politics for the better and serve the people in a far more democratic fashion, for want of a better word, we really need to align all the parties into a freedom movement. So we were talking to various parties. We set up the Belmont Declaration, a meeting in Leicester on the 25th of September 2021, where we were hoping to get a consensus of opinion on how best to approach the next general election. Unfortunately, only Time Party decided to merge with us. Later on, we were close to merging with the Freedom Alliance, but for some reason best known to them, they decided not to pursue that. But we invited people like Richard Tice from Reform Party. They didn't turn up. We invited Lawrence Fox from Reclaim. We went down to London 3 times. We went to London twice, in fact. Unfortunately, he never showed up. So we were disappointed. We went to Herefordshire to meet Neil Hamilton of UKIP. Again, he had various very personal reasons and powerful reasons of the party to remain out with any alliance. So we very much a voice in the loneliness, looking after the people. And I'll tell you why, because a lot of parties haven't declared that there are certain common factors in the decline of the national status. So it's becoming very clear, or rather it became clear with the declaration of the pandemic, that there were forces outside of the country dictating national policy. In fact, it's very clear to all of us in the awake arena that there is the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization as the two main antagonists of our sovereignty. But it's a hard job to actually try and convince the average man and woman on the street that there is such a thing as a supranational influence corrupting our democracy.
Mm.
So we have an uphill struggle. There are people I meet on my leafleting rounds who say, yes, we know about them and we'll come and join you. But the vast majority is, rudely or otherwise say, look, there's no such thing. It's all in your mind. But they can't explain certain things, you see, when I mention the word pandemic preparedness treaty, which we're about to see enforced, what it means, what it tantamounts to, in total darkness about it. So it's with great sadness, I think, we have to fight this. None of the other parties were very forthcoming about criticizing. I think David Curtin of Heritage was obviously very vocal in some respects. But Richard Tice, for example, he first aligned himself with the vaccination lobby of the government. He even insisted that healthcare workers should be mandated to have the vaccine, which by that time we realized there were very severe effects. And rather than read reports in general publication, I actually came across patients with unequivocal problems related to the vaccine. So there were a lot of anomalies in the COVID policies that some people in the public know, but some people just took it for granted. I mean, I walk around the streets and you still see people wearing masks. I can't understand why, but there we are.
Mm. Yeah. It's weird, but
yes,
I suppose, like, again, if I think back, the Brexit part, it was the first time I attended like a march, for example, a protest march. I'm like, what am I doing? What's this come to? I have to go. But in a way, that's what I suppose is empowering some people to say, well, you do need to get involved and take notice of what's going on. I mean, maybe again, who knows why that sort of in 2020 that oppression came hard again. Maybe to stifle some of this momentum. Who knows? It's a tricky one. But I suppose again, like we're saying, even with all that stuff over the last 4 years, we still have a large chunk that thinks everything's fine. Whether or not life needs to get a bit harder again, I don't know. How do you feel about that? To sort of get that fire in the belly, if you like.
Well, I would say this. Having done medical research, when we had this mRNA vaccine launch, there were certain aspects which I thought were very inconsistent with the Declaration of Helsinki, which is the care of the patient, or in this case, care of the population. It's an ethical code. When you do clinical studies or when you launch a new product, there are certain things you observe. You, give the recipient informed consent, which consists of normally a list of things which can go wrong, things to expect, the risks and the benefits, really, in short. There was no such thing because it hadn't been in trial long enough for us to accumulate enough data on long-term safety. Then the next thing is you should be able to offer people the alternative. You should not put such pressure on people that they must have it or otherwise be alienated. And there were various incidents of conflict where even families were divided. Some people didn't want it, or neighbors and friends were against the opposite side, either wanting it or not wanting it. There were lots of conflicts. So the second thing from informed consent was alternative treatment. And then in any new product that's being launched, we carry out what we call pharmacovigilance. We monitor the safety and the progress of the patient. So we would say, look, if you decide to have the vaccination, we would monitor you, and in most clinical products, we check the physical signs and the laboratory indices such as biochemistry, hematology, liver functions, all that sort of thing on a regular basis. And if any abnormalities showed up, we would pull them away from the trial and institute the necessary corrective measures. None of that was was visible. None of that was instituted. And finally, we should have a closure and analyze the results. Again, nobody was analyzing the results. People were sending in the complaints. Some people decided to, some people not, into the yellow card system. You know, there was no formalized way of collating results that may be very important. What I feel is a serious indictment of the protagonists of the rollout program are things like certification of death. You see, when you have figures saying, look, I've lost my wife because of COVID. I mean, there was Lisa Shaw, for example, left Gareth Eve a widower. Why would the government still continue to pursue that? It's beyond me. It's totally unethical. And then when we know that the burden of disease in children is insignificant, very small, and no child in my lifetime has died from any form of coronavirus, that we want to vaccinate them. And when I saw my first 15-year-old teenage boy with myocarditis, I was horrified. So the government has a serious problem on its hands, and the people are right to demand some answers. I know Andrew Bridgen stood up in Parliament in December 2022, in fact, and then in 23, he was kicked out of the party for daring to question the wisdom of the rollout. So we have gone on, time has gone on. I mean, we were talking about things back in 2023, 22, and now we're in 2024, you see, and we see no let-up in the drive to vaccinate children. And then coming along down the line, we have the WHO warning us that there might be a disease X pandemic. They haven't launched it, but they're clairvoyant enough to tell you that there is a disease coming on stream. And here I am trying to explain to people the synchrony between the declaration of a disease X, which they think they know, but they don't, or maybe they do, but are not telling us, and the initiation of the Pandemic Preparedness Treaty. Now, I'm not sure whether you aware of the fundamentals of the Pandemic Preparedness Treaty. It is basically to align all countries signatory to the WHO to follow the measures that WHO is going to recommend upon declaration of the next pandemic. And I said in several public meetings, I said, look, as a medic, we don't need a treaty where we subsume our sovereignty under a non-elected supranational body. What we should be able to do if it was such a life-threatening infection is that we share good practices. There's no need for a treaty. In the same manner that for example, EU, and this is one of the things which I suppose can fall into the realm of this discussion. I mean, EU started as the European Common Market, but it's very strange that a trading bloc has to develop a national anthem, parliament, flag,
yeah.
and so on. So you can see the progression that what started rather innocently as a trading intention became a federation in ambition. So we have now the WHO stealthily marching towards world governance.
Yeah.
Now, if I said it to people I see on the street, it's very difficult to convince them. But I say, look, sit down and think for a while. What's happening?
That's the difficult part, I think, is getting it into the public consciousness of what is actually going on.
Yes.
Yeah, because you speak to some people and they've not heard of any of this, or they're just like, well, I don't know, or like say you're a conspiracy theorist. And it's a tricky one.
Conspiracy theories belong to the same category as racism and phobias.
Yeah,
it's a way to actually shut down very natural, free debate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So where do you see us going forward then? I mean, how are you getting on with recruiting people to the party? And are there people prepared to stand up and become candidates?
To the alliance, Gary.
Well, we number several hundred strong. It's not by any means a big party to talk about. I think our our ambition is certainly very laudable. We want to serve the people, try and save the country. We don't expect to be a government overnight. Certainly not in one election. And if you look at the history of various parties, it took years before they reach any stature. So we're hoping that we make some bridgehead into Parliament with some of our candidates succeeding in this next general election. And it would offer a tremendous opportunity to declare what the people want, make sufficient noise for change, and hopefully that would take us somewhere. I would say, talking to people on both social media and in real life in the public, the amount of supporters we have far exceed the actual number of people who sign up for membership. So I'm not discouraged particularly by the fact that we just have several hundred members. I'm more encouraged by the fact that there are people who have pledged to support, because they see that it is a very commendable wish to straighten out the affairs of our country. I mean, if you look at the immigration situation, there are very decent people flying to Heathrow and so on, showing the passports, getting checked and getting logged in. And then you have people who come through dinghies and claim all sorts of status, discounted passports, and they're costing you and I in taxes £7 million a day. And then the government wishes to raise more taxes to fund these people. And we see no end to the problem. What government? Is the government fit for purpose? No, I don't think so. And what government would want us to fight wars of which we're not a party to? So we're paying a lot out, nearly 30 billion to Ukraine and more coming downstream. It doesn't serve our needs at all. We have problems at home. The decline of the NHS had been further degraded by the COVID pandemic. A lot of people say, look, I can't get to see my GP. What used to be 2-3 weeks is now 6 weeks. I have a 10-minute appointment, and sometimes it's only with the nurse practitioner, not the doctor. And then some people, when they get to see the doctor, he says, oh, you better go to casualty. And when I was working at casualty, I was seeing problems which I, as a GP, used to see myself. So people were decanted from general practice surgeries into A&E departments where they should not be seen to cause problems. So we have endless problems from a profession that has lost interest in patients. And there are some very fundamental things we need to straighten out. I used to run the policy forum on health back in the early 2000s for Andrew Lansley. And we need to look at those things again very seriously.
Yeah. Do you still think, I know you're saying like you ultimately, you know, get to like a parliament sort of positions, but I mean, do you think that model is in itself is fit for purpose? That whole
It is. There's nothing wrong with the model. There is nothing wrong with the model. I think the government, I think in the last couple of days, it has been revealed that people from abroad are coming into us with lower grades than are required of our own students to enter university. We have declared not many years ago, I think it was 2019, they were trying to develop this medical degree doctor apprenticeship. Medical degree doctor apprenticeships. These are not proper undergraduate trainees in the way you traditionally understand how doctors how people become doctors. You know, you take the brightest of school leavers, you take them through medical school curriculum and develop the clinical acumen, and when they qualify and they're fit to treat people. Nowadays, you know, if you're a reporter, there's nothing wrong with the people wanting to do it. I think it's a system that's flawed. So if you're a reporter and you fancy doing doctoring, or you've been a clerk, discharged clerk, if you really want to do medicine, you should go through the rigors of training and medical education to understand medicine holistically and develop an unrivaled clinical acumen that will put safety at the forefront. You don't have to worry about that. So I think the government has failed by trying to deliver medicine on the cheap. It doesn't work. And when you look at the situation with general practice, for example, where I was nearly 40 years ago, the majority of the income being capitation, that means the more patients you have on your list, the better paid you are. Incidentally, no GP has a fixed income. So the better you look after your patients, the more you have and the more prosperous you become. But towards the end of my career, capitation was a very minor part of the income. The majority of the income was made up of incentive payments, initially under the quality outcome framework, the QOF points, but subsequently in all sorts of incentives. And it became very perverse, you know. So where previously people started doctoring patients and then made money, now doctoring people was secondary, and earning quality points, so-called points, became a primary concern. So it's wrong. The ethos is wrong. We need to reconfigure the way the relationship between government, the public, and the doctors is made to function in the NHS.
Okay, well, we've only got a few minutes left. It goes so quickly. So maybe in closing, are you optimistic of where we are going forward?
I'm fairly neutral. I'm very sanguine about the prospects. I think what encourages me is the fact that there are people who are waking up to the fact that there are supranational influences perversely affecting our government, the way we work. For example, you got to tell people, look, central bank digital currency is programmable. Not only do they know how you spend it, they can use it to award or subtract from what you have. For example, it could be tied in very neatly with carbon credits. So if you drive a big V8 and use a lot of fuel, they might say, look, it's going to cost you so much. We then change the value of your assets or your whatever it is you hold in digital currency form. I don't know what it will look like, but I think the imagination will take you into the very dark corners of what it can be, and it doesn't look good at all. So I think what we need to do is to firstly wake the people up, forget about just merely demonstrating and marching and petitioning. We must agree and unite on a single platform to challenge the government. Nothing worries the errand MPs more than having their seat challenged by somebody who is on the side of the people. So if we can kick out those errand MPs, we'll get a far better government to come.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. Yeah. Teck, I'm normally very vocal in these things. Today I was very quiet with you because I believe your various angles of your messages need to be got across, and they're very important. So it's not that I wasn't engaged, it's that I think it was important you got to say that. And just to say, you'd be very welcome back, and maybe we could take up one of those strands in more detail. But thank you very much for today.
Thank you, Casper. I'm just concerned that it's such a broad thing to talk about.
Of course.
I'm mainly skirted around various things in a very superficial manner.
Yeah. Well, let's revisit.
I'd like to explain specific things to you.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Well, we look forward to your chance to do that with us.
And
Thank you very much.
That you give us, we'll put all the information in the description below the video of how people can find you.
Yeah.
You know, if they feel to sign up, then that'd be great to support you.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Gary.
brilliant.
Thank you, Casper.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye from the Quantum Bridge.
Bye. Bye-bye.